Welcome to Echo of Crime YouTube channel. The year was 1973, and the streets of Chicago were burning with crime, fear, and control. At the center of it all was a man whose name still echoes through prison walls, Larry Hoover. To the outside world, he was a feared gang leader. But to his followers, he was Chairman Hoover, the boss, the mind, and the voice of an empire that stretched far beyond the streets. When Hoover was finally convicted for ordering the murder of a rival drug dealer, many thought that was the end of his reign. He was sentenced to 150 to 200 years behind bars, a punishment meant to erase him from the outside world. But what the system didn't realize was that Larry Hoover was never planning to leave his throne. He was about to turn his prison cell into his new headquarters. Inside Stateville Correctional Center, Hoover built what inmates called a silent government. His control was invisible but absolute. He didn't need weapons or violence. His voice alone commanded fear and loyalty. Through letters disguised as family notes and coded messages hidden in legal paperwork, he continued to run one of America's most powerful street operations, the Gangsterdisciples. From inside that gray concrete cell, Hoover's orders flowed through a chain of loyal soldiers, reaching drug corners across multiple U.S. states. Street-level dealers received instructions signed G.D. Board, all written in his style. Every move, every payment, every hit, every expansion, still traced back to him. But Hoover's genius wasn't just criminal, it was strategic. He started calling his gang a community movement, publicly promoting growth and development. To outsiders, it sounded like change. But to those who knew better, it was code. Code for business. Code for control. Code for an empire still alive. By the early 1990s, FBI agents began to notice something strange. How could a man locked inside a maximum security prison still move drugs across states, control meetings, and even approve promotions inside his organization? Someone, somewhere, was helping him. And the walls of Stateville were about to crack open, not from escape, but from exposure. Inside Stateville Correctional Center, time moved slowly, for everyone except Larry Hoover. While most inmates counted down the days to freedom, Hoover was building something far greater, a shadow organization. The Gangsterdisciples weren't just surviving on the outside, they were thriving. Every Friday night, coded letters left the prison. They looked innocent: birthday messages, family updates, legal notes. But hidden between the lines were encrypted orders: names, locations, quantities, payoffs. Each note was delivered through a carefully chosen messenger, a family member, a lawyer, sometimes even a correctional officer who didn't know the code's meaning. Hoover had replaced streets with structure. Inside the gang, members called it the board of directors. Outside, they operated in layers: street soldiers, coordinators, regional chiefs, all reporting upward through an invisible network that pointed back to one man in a cell. To avoid suspicion, Hoover used the slogan growth and development. Publicly, it sounded like a peace movement, a call for education, reform, and unity among young men trapped in gang life. But hidden behind that language was a financial system that turned the organization into a multi-million-dollar machine. The money trail stretched everywhere. Drug corners in Chicago, Memphis, Detroit, and even parts of Atlanta. Couriers delivered packages of cash to businesses registered under false names, record labels, clothing brands, local charities. Every dollar looked clean by the time it reached the organization's leadership. Meanwhile, the FBI began to notice something off. Crime rates connected to Gangsterdisciples' activity weren't dropping, they were evolving. The tactics were too organized, too professional, too controlled to come from the streets alone. Someone was orchestrating it, and all evidence pointed back to one man, a man who hadn't seen the outside world in over 2 decades. So the FBI and DEA launched Operation Headache. For months, agents bugged phone calls, intercepted mail, and monitored visitor logs at Stateville. What they found shocked them. Hoover wasn't hiding his empire. He was managing it like a corporation. In one intercepted call, he discussed project budgets that were really shipments of drugs. In another, he referenced employees that turned out to be street lieutenants. Each call used business language: precise, cold, professional. The deeper the investigation went, the more it looked like the prison system itself had become part of the infrastructure. Some guards had been compromised. Others unknowingly passed messages. Hoover's influence was everywhere. His name carried weight in every major U.S. penitentiary. Inmates across multiple states claimed to work under Hoover's flag, following his rules of discipline, loyalty, and silence. Even prisoners who had never met him acted as if they had. His legend was that powerful. By 1994, Hoover's control was so strong that federal officials realized the gang's command structure extended from inside the prison directly into major American cities. The FBI decided to go all in. They obtained secret court orders to record conversations between Hoover and his top lieutenants. For 18 months, agents collected hundreds of pages of transcripts, each coded, each carefully disguised. It was the smoking gun they needed. One phrase kept appearing: development goals. To the untrained ear, it sounded like a self-help program. But investigators decoded it as distribution targets, shipments of heroin and cocaine managed from prison phones. The truth was undeniable. The man the system had locked away decades earlier was still in command. The empire had evolved beyond the streets. It had become corporate crime hidden under social reform. In 1995, federal agents surrounded Stateville Prison in a quiet dawn raid. Inside, Hoover's cell was searched, his notes seized, and his phone privileges cut off. But when they finally read what was on those papers, they realized they weren't just dismantling a gang. They were dismantling an underground government. It was August 31st, 1995, when federal agents moved in. The early morning silence of Stateville Correctional Center shattered as the sound of boots and metal echoed down the halls. Dozens of FBI agents and U.S. Marshals swept through the maximum security unit, not for a riot, not for an escape, but for one man. Larry Hoover, then 44 years old, sat on the edge of his prison bed, calm, almost detached. He had seen raids before, but this one was different. Agents weren't just searching for contraband. They were here to erase his communication, his reach, his legacy. For months, federal prosecutors had built a 25-page indictment under the Continuing Criminal Enterprise Act, a charge often used for the biggest drug traffickers in the world. The evidence they held was massive. Phone recordings, coded transcripts, financial records, and insider testimonies from his lieutenants. Every piece of paper, every voice note pointed to one truth: Hoover's control never stopped. When agents entered a cell, they found binders labeled development goals, growth reports, and weekly objectives. At first glance, they looked like nonprofit planning files. But under analysis, investigators discovered the shocking truth. They were operational logs for drug shipments, payment tracking, and discipline orders. It wasn't fiction. It was corporate-style management from within a maximum security prison. Federal prosecutors held a press conference that same afternoon. The lead investigator said one line that shook the nation. Larry Hoover ran his organization more efficiently from prison than most CEOs run legitimate businesses. In 1997, Hoover stood trial in federal court under tight security. Every movement was escorted by armed guards. No media was allowed near his transport route. The government presented months of recordings between Hoover and his top men, conversations disguised as charity work but decoded as trafficking orders. The prosecution showed how Hoover's growth and development foundation was actually a front. Donations were laundered drug money. His community outreach events were used for gang coordination. Witness after witness confirmed it. Hoover was not reformed. He had simply gone corporate. But the defense had a different story. They portrayed Hoover as a victim of government overreach, a man trying to rebuild his life and his community. Supporters rallied outside the courthouse with banners reading "Free Larry Hoover." They claimed the government feared his influence, not his crimes. For weeks, the courtroom became a national spectacle. Every major U.S. news outlet followed the trial. Commentators debated whether Hoover was a mastermind or a scapegoat, a criminal, or a man trapped in a system designed to keep him behind bars forever. Yet when the verdict came, the evidence was too strong to ignore. Hoover was found guilty on all charges. including continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy, and drug distribution. His new sentence, 6 life terms, to be served consecutively. It was the official end of the gangster disciples' leadership structure, or so the authorities thought. After sentencing, Hoover was transferred under extreme secrecy to ADX Florence, Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This federal supermax prison was built for total isolation, concrete walls, soundproof cells, and zero contact with the outside world. In Florence, inmates spend 23 hours a day alone. 1 hour of recreation happens inside a steel cage under heavy surveillance. Letters are monitored. Phone calls are banned. For Hoover, communication, his greatest weapon, was now completely gone. Agents reported that even inside ADX, Hoover's name carried weight among other inmates. Some whispered that he could still send messages through coded letters. But the Bureau of Prisons shut down every channel. Strict monitoring, staff rotation, and absolute control. His world, once larger than life, was reduced to a single concrete cell, 7 by 12 feet wide. He was no longer the chairman. He was inmate #86063-024. Even after his empire fell, Hoover's influence rippled across America. In Chicago, the gangster disciples fractured into smaller factions, fighting for control of what was left. In the years that followed, his name became a symbol, to some of power, to others of tragedy. By the 2000s, rappers, activists, and even political commentators referenced him in songs, documentaries, and campaigns. The debate continued. Was Larry Hoover the villain who built a prison empire, or the product of a broken system that bred kings from confinement? The truth, perhaps, is both. Hoover remains in ADX Florence to this day, serving his sentence in total isolation. He has filed appeals and petitions for clemency, claiming he's a changed man. But for the U.S. justice system, his case stands as a warning, a reminder that power doesn't always end with imprisonment. Because sometimes, the most dangerous empires aren't the ones built on the streets. They're the ones built in silence, behind the cold, unbreakable walls of a cell.